Have you ever wondered what it would feel like to witness the birth of an impossible dream, to float like morning mist above ancient China and watch as a single emperor's vision transforms into the most ambitious construction project in human history? Tonight, we'll journey together through time to discover the making of the Great Wall of China, not just as a barrier of stone and earth, but as a testament to human determination that stretches across centuries and touches the very soul of a civilization. Picture, if you will, the moment when scattered kingdoms first dared to imagine connecting their humble defensive walls into something that had never existed before, a continuous barrier stretching across mountains, deserts, and plains for thousands of miles. What kind of mind conceives such an impossibility? What hands could build something so vast that it would outlast the very empire that created it? The story we'll explore tonight unfolds like a gentle dream across more than 2 millennia, beginning in an age when China was fractured into warring states, each building their own small walls to keep neighbors at bay. We'll witness the rise of Emperor Qin Shi Huang, whose vision of unity would demand the ultimate sacrifice from millions of his subjects. We'll drift alongside the master planners who solved engineering challenges that would humble modern architects, designing a structure that could breathe with the landscape itself, adapting to terrain so varied that each mile demanded its own unique solution. What secrets might these ancient stones whisper about the hands that placed them? What about the workers who carried impossibly heavy blocks up treacherous mountain paths, who mixed mortar in desert heat and bitter mountain cold, and who gave their lives to build something that would protect generations they would never meet? Their stories flow through our journey like underground rivers, surfacing in moments of triumph and tragedy that transform mere construction into something approaching the sacred. Good evening, friends, and welcome to the Sleepy Structures. I'm here to guide you on a peaceful journey through the architectural wonders that have shaped our world. Tonight, we'll drift together into the timeless story of the Great Wall of China, letting its ancient wisdom carry us gently toward rest. As we begin this tranquil exploration, I invite you to prepare your space for deep relaxation. Dim your lights to a soft amber glow that whispers of ancient oil lamps flickering in mountain camps. Settle under your most comfortable blanket, feeling its warmth embrace you, like the protective walls we'll discover tonight. Let the outside world fade away as we step back through centuries, leaving behind the rush of modern life for the patient rhythm of stone upon stone, dream upon impossible dream. Take a deep breath and feel your body settling into perfect stillness, knowing that for the next few hours you have nowhere to be but here, in this gentle space, where history becomes a lullaby and ancient achievements transform into the most peaceful of dreams. If this calm journey helps you unwind and find the rest you deserve, you're welcome to like and subscribe. Only if it feels right, only when the moment moves you naturally toward gratitude. Now, as your breathing deepens and your mind begins to quiet, let us return to that impossible dream that started it all. Can you imagine the weight of deciding to reshape the very geography of a continent? The Great Wall story begins not with the first stone laid, but with a moment of pure vision, when one man looked at a divided land and saw not separation, but the possibility of the greatest barrier ever conceived. We'll float together through 5 chapters of this extraordinary tale, beginning with those scattered kingdoms of ancient China, where small earthen walls marked the boundaries between peoples who had known nothing but conflict for generations. What drove them to build these early barriers? How did these humble beginnings plant the seeds for something so magnificent that it would capture the imagination of the entire world? In our first chapter, we'll witness the birth of an empire and the emperor whose ambition would demand the impossible. We'll drift above his court as he studies maps of a fractured realm, his finger tracing the boundaries between kingdoms, already envisioning the continuous line of defense that would protect his unified China from the nomadic peoples of the north. Have you ever held a dream so vast that even you weren't sure you believed in it? As we journey deeper into this story, we'll discover how master engineers solve challenges that had never been faced before. How do you build a wall across terrain that varies from scorching desert to snow-capped peaks? How do you supply construction crews working hundreds of miles from the nearest town? How do you create a structure that can stand for millennia while adapting to landscapes that change with every season? We'll walk alongside the millions of workers whose hands transformed vision into reality, feeling the weight of stones they carried, the bite of mountain air they breathed, and the pride and sorrow they carried in hearts that beat with determination, even as they faced hardships we can barely imagine. Their story is one of sacrifice and triumph intertwined, of ordinary people accomplishing extraordinary things simply because they believed it could be done. The legends that grew around their achievement will enchant us as we explore how the wall became more than mere stone and mortar, how it transformed into a symbol, a myth, and an eternal reminder of what human beings can accomplish when they commit to something greater than themselves. And finally, we'll witness the wall's awakening in our modern world, where ancient stones welcome millions of visitors who come seeking not just history, but inspiration. So close your eyes now and let yourself drift backward through time, feeling the centuries flow past like a gentle river, carrying you toward dreams of stone and determination, toward the impossible made real, through patience, vision, and the endless power of human hope. Close your eyes and let your consciousness drift backwards through time, like a feather floating on an ancient breeze that carries the whispers of 23 centuries. Feel yourself becoming weightless, your modern worries dissolving into the mist as you travel deeper and deeper into the past. The world around you begins to shift and shimmer, colours bleeding from bright modernity into the muted earth tones of ancient China. You find yourself floating high above a vast landscape, where the morning sun casts long shadows across rolling hills and fertile valleys. Below you stretches a land divided, fragmented into 7 warring kingdoms that have spent centuries locked in endless conflict. Have you ever wondered what it feels like to look down upon a world where every border is marked by blood and stone? The year is 475 BCE, and you drift like smoke above the Warring States period, watching as each kingdom builds its own defensive barriers against its neighbours. Small walls of rammed earth and timber snake across hilltops and valley mouths. Crude but determined attempts to keep enemies at bay. These aren't grand structures yet, just desperate earthworks, thrown up by desperate people, who have known nothing but war for generations. You might think building a wall across an entire country sounds crazy, and you'd be absolutely right. But sometimes, the most impossible dreams begin in the minds of those who have seen too much conflict, too much division. As you float through this ancient air, you can almost taste the exhaustion of a civilization that has forgotten what peace feels like. Your consciousness drifts closer to one particular kingdom, Qin, where something different is stirring. The wind carries you over terraced fields, where farmers pause in their work to gaze nervously at the horizon, always watching for the dust clouds that signal approaching armies. Children play war games with sticks and stones, the only kind of play they know in this fractured world. In the heart of the Qin kingdom, within walls of packed earth and timber, a young prince named Yingzheng walks through courtyards where advisors speak in hushed tones about strategy and survival. You watch him pause beside a fountain, his reflection wavering in the disturbed water as servants hurry past with messages from the borderlands. Something in his eyes suggests he's already dreaming of solutions that others would call impossible. Can you imagine carrying the weight of a kingdom on your shoulders when you're barely old enough to understand what kingdoms are. The boy who will become Qin Shi Huang doesn't know it yet, but he's about to inherit not just a throne, but a vision that will reshape the very definition of what's possible. Time flows around you like a gentle river as you witness Yingzheng's ascension to power in 246 BCE. The boy becomes a king, and the king becomes something more, a unifier, with an obsession that burns brighter than any flame. You float above his palace as he spreads maps across marble tables, his fingers tracing the boundaries between the warring states, like a physician examining infected wounds. The maps tell a story of division that has lasted for centuries. Each kingdom has built its own defences, the state of Chu, with its earth embankments, Yan, with its stone foundations in the northern mountains, and Zhao, with timber palisades that stretch across grasslands. These walls weren't built to create one great barrier, but rather to keep neighbours apart, to maintain the divisions that have defined Chinese civilization for so long. But watch now, as the young emperor's finger traces a different pattern entirely. Instead of seeing 7 separate defensive lines, he envisioned something that has never existed in human history. One continuous barrier that could protect not 7 kingdoms, but one united empire. His advisors lean forward, squinting at the maps, trying to understand what their emperor sees, that they cannot. You drift closer, close enough to hear the whispered conversations that will change the world. The northern nomads, Qin Shi Huang murmurs, his voice carrying the weight of destiny. They raid our borders at will, striking where we are weakest, disappearing back into the steppes before we can respond. But what if there were no weak points? What if there were no gaps? The concept is so audacious that even his most trusted generals exchange uncertain glances. Connect all the existing walls, build new sections across hundreds of miles of wilderness, create a barrier that could stretch from sea to mountain, from desert to forest. As you hover in this moment of conception, you witness the birth of the most ambitious construction project in human history. It begins not with earthworks or stone cutting, but with a single moment of impossible imagination. Have you ever had a dream so vast that even you weren't sure you believed in it? The year 221 BCE arrives like thunder across the landscape. As Qin finally conquers the last of the warring states, you watch from your timeless vantage point as armies march beneath victory banners, as walls that once divided kingdoms are torn down or repurposed. For the first time in centuries, China is one land, under one ruler, but unity brings new challenges, and the greatest of these comes from the north. Your consciousness drifts toward the northern borders, where the Great Wall's story truly begins. Here, beyond the settled lands of agriculture and cities, stretch the endless grasslands of the Mongol steppes. The Xiongnu Confederation, fierce nomadic warriors who live on horseback and know the art of war as intimately as breathing, have been probing these borders for generations. You float above their encampments and witness scenes that explain the emperor's mounting concern. These are not armies in the traditional sense, but entire peoples on the move, families, livestock, warriors, all flowing across the landscape, like water finding the easiest path downhill. When they raid Chinese settlements, they strike with devastating speed, then vanish back into territories too vast for any army to patrol effectively. The existing walls of the former kingdoms were never designed to handle threats like this. Built to slow down armies marching between cities, these barriers were easily bypassed by nomadic raiders who could simply flow around them, like water around stones. What the emperor envisions is something entirely different. Not just a wall, but a system, a continuous line of defense that could channel and control the movement of entire peoples. Picture yourself floating above the Emperor's War Council as they debate this unprecedented challenge. The maps spread before them show a border that stretches for thousands of miles, across terrain that varies from desert to mountain, from grassland to forest. To defend such a border with traditional fortresses would require more soldiers than the Empire possesses, but a wall A properly designed wall with watchtowers and garrison stations could allow relatively small numbers of defenders to monitor and control vast stretches of frontier. The decision, when it finally comes, carries the weight of destiny. You are present in that moment when Qin Shi Huang stands before his assembled ministers and speaks the words that will echo through history. We will connect the walls. We will build what has never been built. We will create a barrier that will stand for all time. You might wonder, what kind of person decides to reshape the very geography of a continent? The answer, as you observe from your ethereal perspective, is someone who has spent his entire life watching division and conflict tear apart everything he holds dear. This isn't mere megalomaniacal ambition. It's the practical solution of a ruler who understands that true security requires unprecedented action. The earliest construction begins almost immediately, but these initial efforts are nothing like the stone monument that tourists will climb centuries in the future. You drift above work sites where thousands of labourers, soldiers, farmers pressed into service and prisoners of war begin the back-breaking work of extending and connecting the existing earthworks of the former kingdoms. Watch, as they use the techniques available to their age, rammed earth construction, where layers of soil are pounded between wooden frames, until they form walls as hard as stone. Timber from nearby forests provides structural support and creates barriers in areas where earth alone won't suffice. Local stones are gathered and fitted together, wherever the terrain provides suitable materials. The work is crude by later standards, but effective. You observe as the first connected sections begin to take shape. Earthen barriers that rise 6 to 8 feet above the surrounding terrain, wide enough at the top for soldiers to patrol, and strong enough to stop horses and delay infantry, long enough for reinforcements to arrive. But even as you watch these early construction efforts, you can sense that this is just the beginning. The workers themselves seem to understand that they are part of something larger than any single construction project. In their evening conversations around cooking fires, they speak of the wall as if it were a living thing, growing day by day across the landscape. The logistics alone boggle the mind. Materials must be transported across hundreds of miles of wilderness. Food and water must be supplied to work crews operating far from established settlements. Tools wear out and must be replaced. Workers become injured or sick and must be cared for or replaced. Pause. You float above supply trains that stretch for miles, ox-drawn carts loaded with provisions, and soldiers marching alongside to protect against the very raiders the wall is meant to stop. As seasons pass beneath your timeless observation, you witness the wall beginning to take on a life of its own. What started as the ambitious vision of one emperor becomes a project that touches every corner of the empire. Farmers contribute grain to feed the workers. Craftsmen forge the tools needed for construction. Merchants organize the supply chains that keep materials flowing to the work sites. Pause. The wall becomes more than a barrier. It becomes a symbol of what unified China can accomplish when all its resources are focused on a single goal. You watch as news of the construction spreads beyond China's borders, as neighboring kingdoms send envoys to observe this unprecedented undertaking, as the very idea of the Great Wall begins to capture imaginations far beyond the emperor's original military objectives. But even in these early stages, you can sense the enormous human cost that this achievement will demand. The workers labouring in the cold northern air are fathers and sons pulled away from their families, farmers taken from their fields during crucial planting seasons, and craftsmen whose skills are desperately needed in their home communities. Pause. The wall may be growing stone by stone, but it's growing at the expense of countless individual dreams and plans. Have you ever wondered what it costs to build something truly great? Pause. The answer, as you observe from your perspective outside of time, is always more than anyone expects when the project begins. But somehow, in ways that defy easy explanation, the most important achievements in human history always seem to find the resources they need, even when those resources seem impossible to obtain. The emperor himself becomes consumed by the project in ways that surprise even his closest advisors. You float above his private chambers, where he studies reports from the construction sites, plans modifications to the design, and calculates how long each section will take to complete. The wall has become his obsession, but also his legacy, the proof that his vision of a unified China is more than just political theory. As winter settles over the northern territories, construction slows but never stops entirely. You watch as workers build shelters near their work sites, determined to continue even in conditions that would stop any normal project. The wall has developed its own momentum now, driven not just by imperial decree, but by the collective will of a people who have begun to believe in the impossible. Supply chains adapt to the changing seasons. Different materials become available in different months. The workforce shifts as agricultural demands pull some workers home, and military needs bring new recruits to the construction sites. Through it all, the wall continues to grow, section by section, stone by stone, creating something that has never existed before in human history. Pause. Your consciousness drifts along the emerging barrier, observing how it adapts to the changing terrain. In some areas, the wall follows ridgelines, taking advantage of natural defensive positions. In others, it cuts straight across valleys, creating artificial obstacles where none existed before. Each mile presents new challenges, new opportunities, and new solutions that must be invented on the spot. The workers develop their own techniques, their own shortcuts, and their own innovations born from daily contact with the practical challenges of construction. You observe as knowledge flows both ways, from the imperial architects down to the labourers, but also from the experienced builders up to the planners who are learning that some aspects of this project can only be understood by those who are actually building it. As the first year of major construction draws to a close, you find yourself floating above a landscape that has already been permanently transformed. The wall is still crude, still incomplete, still more vision than reality in most places, but it exists now in ways that go beyond mere physical construction. Pause. It exists in the imagination of everyone who has heard about it, in the pride of those who have worked on it, and in the fear of those who see it as a threat to their traditional ways of life. The Emperor's impossible dream has become a tangible reality that stretches across hundreds of miles of Chinese territory. But this is still just the beginning. As you hover in the gathering dusk above the work sites where torches flicker and night shifts prepare to continue the work, you can sense that the greatest challenges still lie ahead. The basic concept has been proven. It is possible to build a continuous barrier across the varied terrain of northern China. The early construction techniques have been tested and refined. The supply systems have been established and are functioning. Pause. Most importantly, the will to complete this unprecedented project has been demonstrated beyond any doubt. But completing the wall will require resources and human sacrifice on a scale that even the Emperor's most ambitious projections have not fully anticipated. The easy sections have been built first. What lies ahead are the mountains, the deserts, and the places where every mile will cost exponentially more in materials, labour, and human lives. As your consciousness prepares to drift forward through time, to witness the next phase of this incredible story, you pause for one final look at the construction sites below. Cooking fires dot the landscape like fallen stars. Workers rest in makeshift shelters, exhausted from another day of moving earth and stone. Guards patrol the partially completed sections, watching for the very enemies this wall is meant to stop. And somewhere in the distance, barely visible in the evening light, you can see the outline of work camps being established for tomorrow's construction. The next mile, the next impossible section that will somehow be built, because so many people now believe that it can be built. The Great Wall of China exists now not just as an emperor's vision, but as a shared dream that has captured the imagination of an entire civilization. And as your spirit drifts closer to the earth, you find yourself approaching vast construction sites where master planners are gathering, their minds filled with impossible dreams of stone and strategy, ready to transform this basic barrier into something that will endure for millennia. Your consciousness settles softly among the master planners and engineers, their weathered faces illuminated by flickering oil lamps as they study vast maps of the Empire. The air around you hums with quiet intensity, as these brilliant minds grapple with a challenge that has never before existed in human history. You float like gentle mist above their shoulders, watching as calloused fingers trace routes across parchment that represents thousands of miles of wilderness, mountain peaks, and desert expanses. Can you imagine trying to draw a straight line across an entire mountain range? These ancient architects faced exactly that impossibility, multiplied across terrain so varied and hostile that modern engineers would reach for satellites and computer modeling. Instead, they have only hemp paper, bamboo measuring rods, and minds sharpened by generations of practical construction experience. The head surveyor, Master Chen, spreads the largest map across a table made from a single massive tree trunk. His hair has gone white from decades of calculating angles and distances, and his hands move with the precision of someone who has learned that small mistakes in planning become catastrophic failures in construction. You watch as he places small stone markers on the map, each one representing a critical decision point where the wall's route must be determined. "Here," he murmurs, his voice barely above a whisper in the pre-dawn quiet. "We must choose between following the valley floor, where transport will be easier, or climbing the ridge, where defense will be stronger." His finger hovers over a section of map where brown ink indicates mountainous terrain so complex that the cartographers have simply marked it with wavy lines, and the notation difficult passage. You drift closer, close enough to see how these master planners have divided their impossible task into manageable segments. The wall must traverse 5 distinct types of terrain, each requiring completely different engineering solutions. Mountains demand one approach, deserts another, grasslands a third, forest regions a fourth, and coastal areas a fifth. Ancient GPS, more like ancient good luck, figure it out yourself. Yet somehow these methodical minds are creating systematic solutions to each challenge. The mountain sections consume most of their attention, and for good reason. You observe as Master Chen unfurls detailed drawings of ridge systems that stretch for hundreds of miles, where summer temperatures can exceed 40 degrees, and winter cold drops so far below freezing that mortar becomes impossible. The wall must somehow navigate terrain where a single mistake in route selection could add months to construction time, or make entire sections impossible to defend. Watch as the engineers debate the fundamental question that will determine the wall's ultimate effectiveness. Should it follow the natural contours of the landscape, winding like a snake to take advantage of every defensive position? Or should it maintain as straight a line as possible to minimize construction time and materials? Their solution, emerging through hours of quiet discussion, reveals the sophisticated thinking that will make this project possible. "We follow the spine of the mountains," Master Chen explains to his assembled team, "but we don't fight unnecessary battles with the terrain. Where nature provides a cliff face, we build minimally. Where valleys offer easy passage to invaders, we build massively. The wall must breathe with the landscape, not dominate it." You float above intricate drawings that show how this philosophy translates into practical engineering. In mountain passes, the wall will be built higher and thicker, with multiple defensive layers and elaborate gate systems. Along ridge lines, where natural barriers already exist, the wall can be lower and simpler, serving more as a patrol route than an absolute barrier. In valleys that cannot be avoided, the wall will incorporate natural streams and rock formations, turning the landscape itself into part of the defensive system. The surveying techniques they develop are marvels of practical ingenuity. You watch as Master Chen demonstrates how teams of surveyors will use bamboo poles of precise length to measure distances across terrain where no existing roads exist. Mirrors made from polished bronze will flash signals between mountain peaks, allowing survey teams to coordinate their measurements across vast distances without the benefit of modern communication. Have you ever tried to measure something really large with very small tools? These ancient surveyors face that challenge on a continental scale. Their solution involves a system of triangulation so sophisticated that it won't be improved upon for centuries. By establishing reference points on prominent peaks and calculating angles between them, they can map routes through territory that no single person has ever fully traversed. The route selection process reveals itself as part art, part science, and part educated guesswork. You observe as teams of scouts return from months-long expeditions into unmapped territory, carrying detailed notes about water sources, local materials, seasonal weather patterns, and the movements of both wildlife and potential enemies. This information gets integrated into the master plan through a process of collective decision-making that balances dozens of competing factors. Water presents one of the most complex challenges. The wall must be built across regions where reliable water sources are separated by days of travel. Yet the construction process will require enormous quantities of water for mixing mortar, supporting work crews, and maintaining livestock. You watch as the engineers develop a system of cisterns and aqueducts that parallels the wall itself, creating infrastructure that will serve both construction and long-term defense needs. The architectural solutions they devise for different terrains demonstrate an understanding of engineering principles that won't be formally codified for centuries. In desert regions, the wall's foundation must be dug deep enough to reach stable soil beneath the shifting sands, then built with a slight inward lean to resist the pressure of sand accumulation. In mountain areas, the foundation must follow the natural fracture lines of the rock, utilizing the strength of the underlying stone rather than fighting against it. You drift along imaginary routes as the planners walk through their proposed construction sequence. The wall cannot be built randomly. The order of construction must account for supply lines, seasonal weather patterns, the availability of local materials, and the need to maintain defensive coverage even while work is in progress. Their solution involves starting construction at multiple points simultaneously, then connecting the segments as they grow toward each other. The watchtower designs reveal the sophisticated military thinking behind the wall's architecture. You observe as Master Chen sketches towers that are not merely tall platforms for observation, but complex multi-story structures designed to serve as self-sufficient mini-fortresses. Each tower must be capable of housing a garrison through extended siege conditions, with its own water storage, food supplies, and ammunition reserves. The spacing between towers reflects careful calculations about sight lines, communication methods, and overlapping fields of fire. Too close together, and the towers become prohibitively expensive. Too far apart and gaps in coverage allow enemies to approach undetected. The optimal distance, determined through painstaking analysis of terrain and defensive requirements, varies from half a mile in complex mountain areas to 2 miles across open grasslands. Can you picture the challenge of designing structures that must serve multiple functions while being built by workers with limited tools and materials? Each watchtower must be tall enough for long-distance observation, strong enough to withstand siege weapons, large enough to house a garrison, yet simple enough to be constructed by teams working far from major population centers. The garrison station designs address an even more complex challenge, creating permanent military communities along the wall that can remain supplied and effective over decades of service. You watch as the engineers plan compounds that include barracks, armories, stables, workshops, and even small farms to reduce dependence on supply lines that may be disrupted during wartime. These garrison stations reveal the wall's evolution from a simple barrier to a comprehensive defensive system. The stations are positioned at strategic intervals where they can control access through mountain passes, river crossings, or other critical terrain features. Each station is designed to operate independently if necessary, but also to coordinate with neighboring positions through an elaborate system of signal fires and mounted messengers. The engineering solutions for river crossings demonstrate particular ingenuity. The wall cannot simply stop at every stream and resume on the other side. Such gaps would render the entire system useless. Instead, the engineers design underwater foundations, reinforced bridge structures, and flood-resistant construction techniques that allow the wall to maintain its integrity even during seasonal flooding. You observe as they sketch cross-sections showing how the wall's foundation extends deep below the normal water level, anchored in bedrock where possible, designed to channel floodwaters rather than resist them directly. The bridge sections incorporate multiple arches to reduce stress during high water, with reinforced abutments that can withstand the impact of debris carried by flash floods. Desert construction presents entirely different challenges. The engineers must design foundations that can remain stable in sand that shifts with every windstorm, walls that can withstand temperature variations of 60 degrees between day and night, and construction techniques that account for the scarcity of both water and traditional building materials. Their solution involves importing the concept of rammed earth construction, but adapting it for desert conditions. Local sand is mixed with clay transported from distant sources, creating a concrete-like material that hardens to stone-like durability. The wall's design includes internal drainage systems to prevent water damage during rare but intense desert storms, and external surfaces angled to deflect sand carried by prevailing winds. The transition zones between different terrain types require especially sophisticated engineering. You float above sections where desert meets mountain, where grassland transitions to forest, and where the wall must adapt its construction technique over relatively short distances while maintaining structural continuity. These transitions become some of the most technically challenging sections to design and build. As the planning phase progresses, you witness the development of standardized construction techniques that can be adapted to local conditions while maintaining consistency across the entire project. The engineers create detailed specifications for foundation depths, wall heights, material ratios, and construction sequences that can be followed by work crews operating hundreds of miles apart. The specifications reveal an understanding of quality control that would be familiar to modern project managers. Standard measurements ensure that defensive equipment designed for one section of wall will fit properly at any other section. Standardized material ratios guarantee consistent strength and durability. Standardized construction sequences minimize the risk of structural failures that could compromise entire sections. You observe as the engineers grapple with one of their most complex challenges, designing a structure that must be built over decades while remaining defensively effective throughout the construction process. Partially completed sections cannot be left vulnerable to attack, so the construction sequence must create defensible positions even before the wall reaches its final form. Their solution involves building the wall in defensive modules, sections that are complete and functional even if neighboring sections remain unfinished. Each module includes temporary access routes, water storage, and defensive positions that can be manned by relatively small garrisons until the permanent garrison stations are completed. The Ming Dynasty redesign phase represents a revolution in wall construction technology. You watch as centuries pass in moments, observing how the basic earthen walls of the original construction gradually give way to sophisticated stone and brick architecture that transforms the wall from a simple barrier into an architectural masterpiece. The Ming engineers inherit the basic root and foundation work of their predecessors, but they bring construction techniques refined by centuries of experience. The rammed earth construction that served adequately for the original wall is systematically replaced with precisely cut stone blocks in the foundations and standardized brick construction in the superstructure. You drift above quarries where workers extract granite blocks weighing several tons each, observing the development of sophisticated lifting and transport techniques that allow these massive stones to be moved up mountainsides and positioned with remarkable precision. The engineering required to move such materials across difficult terrain without modern machinery represents one of history's great logistical achievements. The brick-making operations reveal the Ming Dynasty's systematic approach to standardization. You observe kilns producing millions of bricks to identical specifications, each one marked with the stamp of its maker to ensure quality control. The bricks are designed to interlock in ways that distribute structural loads evenly, creating walls that are stronger than the sum of their individual components. The Ming reconstruction also introduces architectural refinements that transform the wall's appearance. The characteristic battlements, decorative elements, and sophisticated gate systems that define the Great Wall in popular imagination are all products of Ming engineering. These features serve functional purposes. The battlements provide cover for defenders, and the decorative elements help with drainage and structural stability. But they also reflect the Ming Dynasty's desire to create a monument worthy of their civilization. Have you ever noticed how the most beautiful architecture often emerges when form perfectly follows function? The Ming Dynasty's Great Wall achieves this balance, creating structures that are simultaneously highly effective defensive installations and inspiring architectural achievements. The engineers understand that a wall built to last for centuries must inspire the pride and dedication of those who maintain it. The technical specifications for Ming Dynasty construction reveal engineering principles that remain sound today. Foundation depths are calculated based on local soil conditions and seasonal freeze-thaw cycles. Wall thicknesses vary according to height and local wind loads. Materials are selected and combined to create structures that can withstand earthquakes, extreme weather, and the ordinary stresses of centuries of use. You observe as the Ming engineers develop new solutions for the challenges that defeated some sections of the original wall. Improved drainage systems prevent water damage. Better mortar formulations create stronger bonds between stones. Reinforced foundation techniques prevent settling and structural deformation over time. The communication systems integrated into the Ming wall design demonstrate sophisticated understanding of military coordination requirements. You watch as they plan signal beacon positions that can relay messages across the entire length of the wall in a matter of hours. Each beacon station is positioned for optimal visibility to its neighbours, with backup positions to maintain communications even if individual stations are captured or destroyed. The signal system employs multiple methods: smoke during the day, fire at night, and flag systems for detailed message transmission. The engineers designed standardized codes that allow complex military information to be transmitted rapidly across vast distances, creating what amounts to an ancient telecommunications network integrated into the wall's architecture. As the planning phase draws toward completion, you witness the creation of the most comprehensive construction manual in ancient history. The master planners document every aspect of their designs, from foundation excavation techniques to final architectural details. These documents will guide construction crews working across thousands of miles of territory, ensuring that the completed wall maintains consistent quality and defensive effectiveness. The manual includes detailed drawings, material specifications, construction sequences, quality control procedures, and troubleshooting guides for common problems. It represents the accumulated wisdom of generations of engineers, distilled into practical instructions that can be followed by workers with varying levels of skill and experience. You float above the final planning sessions where Master Chen and his team review their completed designs one last time before construction begins in earnest. The maps now show not just routes and elevations, but detailed specifications for every mile of wall, every watchtower, and every garrison station. Supply routes are planned and provisioned. Work crews are organized and equipped. The greatest construction project in human history is ready to move, from planning to implementation. The transition from design to construction marks a fundamental shift in the project's character. The quiet, contemplative work of planning gives way to the urgent physical demands of actual building. You sense the anticipation building among the assembled teams as they prepare to transform their careful plans into physical reality. As dawn breaks over the construction sites, you feel yourself being drawn toward the gathering masses of workers, soldiers, craftsmen, farmers, and labourers from across the empire, who will transform these elegant plans into the stone and mortar reality of the Great Wall. The master planners have done their work. Now the real building begins, and you drift toward the gathering masses of workers as construction begins. You find yourself floating gently among the millions of workers as they begin their monumental task, the morning mist swirling around their determined figures like whispered prayers ascending to the heavens. The air carries the sound of countless footsteps on rocky paths, the creak of ox-drawn carts loaded with stone and timber, and the quiet conversations of people who have been called from every corner of the empire to build something that has never existed before. What would you do if someone asked you to carry stones up a mountain every day? As you drift like smoke through the gathering crowd, you witness the faces of those who will answer this question not in theory, but in the grinding reality of daily labour that stretches ahead for years, perhaps decades, of their lives. The work begins before dawn, when the mountain air still holds the bite of night's cold. You watch as workers emerge from rough shelters built into hillsides and valley floors, their breath visible in small clouds as they prepare for another day of moving the very bones of the earth. Soldiers from the Imperial Army move alongside peasant farmers conscripted from distant provinces, their different backgrounds united by the common challenge of transforming stone and soil into an impossible wall. Among them walk prisoners of war from the conquered kingdoms, men who once fought against the very empire they now serve through forced labour. You observe their faces in the pale pre-dawn light, some resigned, some defiant, all adapting to circumstances that none of them could have imagined when they woke up in their own beds just months before. The wall will be built by willing hands and unwilling ones alike, each contributing to an achievement that transcends the individual circumstances that brought them here. You think your commute is tough? Try walking to work, up Mount Everest, carrying rocks. The daily journey to work sites often involves climbs that would challenge modern hikers equipped with specialized gear. These ancient workers make the same climbs carrying bamboo baskets filled with stone blocks, timber beams, and the clay that will become mortar when mixed with precious water carried up from distant streams. The construction sites themselves buzz with activity that follows rhythms older than recorded history. You float above quarries, where teams of workers split massive stones using techniques passed down through generations of craftsmen. Iron wedges are driven into natural cracks in the rock face, then expanded with wooden splinters that swell when soaked with water, splitting stones with surgical precision that would impress modern engineers. Watch as the stone-cutting teams develop their own specialized vocabulary, their own hand signals, and their own methods for evaluating which rocks will split cleanly and which will shatter uselessly. Master stonecutters, their hands scarred by decades of work, guide younger men in reading the grain of granite, the stress patterns in limestone, and the hidden flaws that can turn a perfect block into rubble if struck incorrectly. The transport of materials reveals human ingenuity pushed to its absolute limits. You observe as workers construct elaborate systems of ramps, pulleys, and leverage devices to move blocks weighing thousands of pounds, up slopes so steep that modern vehicles would require winches and specialized equipment. Bamboo scaffolding rises against cliff faces like delicate lacework, supporting supply routes that seem to defy gravity itself. Teams of 20 or 30 men coordinate their movements with the precision of dancers, using chanted rhythms to synchronize their lifting, pushing, and pulling. The chants serve practical purposes. They coordinate effort, maintain morale, and help workers pace themselves for labor that must continue hour after hour, without pause. But they also transform the construction sites into something almost musical, as if the mountains themselves were singing the wall into existence. The seasonal rhythms of construction reveal the project's true scope. You drift through time, watching as spring brings the rapid snowmelt that turns streams into torrents, washing out supply routes and forcing work crews to rebuild their access roads before they can resume building the wall itself. Summer brings scorching heat in the deserts and grasslands, where work must begin before dawn and pause during the brutal midday hours, when metal tools become too hot to handle safely. Have you ever worked outside in weather so extreme that it becomes another opponent to overcome? These workers face temperature ranges that modern labor laws would consider inhumane. Desert sections see temperatures that exceed 40 degrees Celsius during the day, then drop below freezing at night. Mountain sections experience blizzards that can bury work sites under meters of snow, forcing crews to dig out their tools and materials before they can resume construction. Autumn brings the race against approaching winter, as crews work frantically to complete defensive sections before the harsh northern winter makes construction impossible. You watch as supervisors make daily calculations about how much work can be completed before the first killing frost, which materials can be safely left exposed to winter weather, and which work sites must be abandoned until spring returns. Winter transforms the construction sites into scenes of almost unimaginable hardship. You observe workers breaking frozen ground with tools that shatter in the cold, mixing mortar with water that must be kept from freezing through constant stirring, and the addition of rice wine that serves as primitive antifreeze. The work continues even when fingers become too numb to grip tools properly, when breathing the frigid air burns lungs, and when frostbite claims toes and fingers with ruthless regularity. The daily routine of construction work follows patterns that remain unchanged for decades. Workers rise in darkness, consume simple meals of rice porridge and vegetables, then begin the journey to their assigned work sites. The actual building involves countless repetitions of basic tasks: mixing mortar, lifting stones, fitting blocks together, checking alignment, applying mortar, and lifting the next stone. But within this repetitive framework, you witness moments of extraordinary skill and creativity. Master masons demonstrate techniques for fitting irregular stones together so perfectly that no mortar is needed, creating joints so tight that a knife blade cannot penetrate them. Carpenters create complex wooden frameworks that allow walls to be built to precise heights and angles, even on terrain that offers no level surfaces for reference. The specialization that develops among the workforce creates informal hierarchies based on skill rather than social class. You observe former farmers who become expert stone cutters, soldiers who discover a talent for the precise work of mortar mixing, and prisoners who earn respect through their ability to organize efficient supply chains from quarries to work sites. Can you imagine finding purpose and pride in work that you never chose to do? Despite the hardships, many workers develop deep investment in the quality and permanence of their contributions. They begin to speak of their sections of wall, taking personal responsibility for construction quality that will outlast their own lives by centuries. The death toll mounts with grim inevitability as the years pass. You witness accidents that are unavoidable given the dangerous nature of the work: stones that slip from hoists and crush workers below, scaffolding that collapses under excessive loads, and avalanches triggered by construction activity that bury entire work crews. Each death is mourned by fellow workers who understand that they face the same risks every day they report to their assignments. Disease takes an even heavier toll than accidents. Malnutrition weakens immune systems already stressed by exhausting physical labor. Respiratory ailments, caused by constant exposure to stone, dust and harsh weather, spread rapidly through the cramped worker housing. Injuries that would heal with proper rest and medical care become infected and fatal when workers cannot afford to stop working long enough to recover properly. The informal burial grounds that develop near major construction sites tell stories of sacrifice that official histories rarely record. You float above these quiet places where workers who died far from home are laid to rest by fellow labourers who barely knew their names but understood their contributions. Simple stone markers, when materials permit or just carefully arranged rocks, mark graves that will themselves become part of the wall's foundation as construction expands. Yet amid the hardship and loss, you also observe moments of unexpected beauty and human connection. Workers from different regions share techniques and stories from their home provinces. Evening cooking fires become gathering places where songs from across the empire blend into new melodies, created by the unique circumstances of wall construction. Friendships form between men who would never have met under normal circumstances. Bonds forged by shared hardship and common purpose. The ingenuity that emerges from necessity constantly amazes even the most experienced supervisors. Workers develop new tools adapted to specific challenges they encounter daily. They create more efficient techniques for tasks that must be repeated thousands of times. They solve logistical problems that the original planners never anticipated, finding ways to transport materials across terrain that seemed impassable. You observe as experienced work crews develop their own methods for evaluating structural integrity, their own quality control procedures, and their own training systems for new workers. The wall becomes a vast, distributed engineering school, where practical knowledge accumulates and spreads through informal networks of skilled craftsmen. The changing of seasons brings different challenges, but also different opportunities. Spring thaws reveal foundation work that has survived the winter's freeze-thaw cycles, validating construction techniques and identifying problems that must be corrected. Summer's long daylight hours allow extended work schedules that can compensate for time lost during harsh weather. Autumn harvests in nearby regions sometimes provide additional labourers during agricultural slack periods. Winter, despite its hardships, becomes a time for maintenance and preparation. Workers repair tools damaged during the construction season, process materials that will be needed when building resumes, and plan improvements to work methods based on the previous year's experience. The annual cycle creates natural breaks that allow the workforce to recover physically and mentally from the intense demands of active construction. The evolution of worker housing reflects the project's transition from temporary emergency to permanent undertaking. Initial shelters of bamboo and canvas give way to more substantial structures, built from stone quarried during wall construction. Work camps develop into settled communities with their own social structures, leadership hierarchies, and cultural traditions. You drift through these emerging communities, observing how they develop their own markets where workers trade goods and services, their own entertainment where musicians and storytellers provide relief from the day's labours, and their own informal governance systems that handle disputes and coordinate shared resources. The families that form within these communities represent both hope and additional hardship. Children born in work camps know no other life than the wall's construction. Wives who follow their husbands to remote construction sites create domestic stability that makes the harsh conditions more bearable, but they also face the dangers and deprivations that affect everyone involved in the project. As decades pass, you witness entire generations growing up in the shadow of the wall's construction. Young men who begin as apprentice workers mature into master craftsmen. Sons follow fathers into the same trade specializations. Knowledge accumulates not just in official records, but also in the lived experience of families whose entire identities become intertwined with the wall's construction. The regional variations in construction techniques reflect the diverse backgrounds of the workforce. Workers from mountainous regions bring expertise in working with stone and managing steep terrain. Those from agricultural areas contribute knowledge of soil engineering and water management. Coastal workers understand the challenges of building in areas subject to frequent storms and seasonal flooding. These diverse techniques gradually blend and evolve as workers from different regions learn from each other. You observe the development of hybrid construction methods that combine the best elements from multiple traditions, creating approaches that are more effective than any single regional technique could provide. The wall's construction becomes a vast laboratory for engineering experimentation. When conventional approaches fail, workers must innovate or abandon entire sections of the project. The successful innovations spread rapidly through informal networks of experienced craftsmen, while failed experiments are abandoned and forgotten. The completed wall represents not just massive labour investment, but the accumulated wisdom of thousands of individual problem-solving efforts. The psychological toll of the work proves as challenging as the physical demands. Workers must maintain focus and precision while performing dangerous tasks in harsh conditions day after day, often with no clear end date for their service. The mental discipline required to continue quality work under such circumstances shapes the character of everyone involved in the project. Yet you also observe how the work provides meaning and purpose that transcends individual hardship. Workers speak of building something that will protect their children and grandchildren. They take pride in contributing to an achievement that will outlast kingdoms and dynasties. The wall becomes larger than its military purpose. It becomes a symbol of what human determination can accomplish when focused on a worthy goal. As your consciousness drifts through the final years of major construction, you witness the completion of sections that have consumed entire lifetimes of effort. Workers who began as young men see the wall reach its final form in their old age, their children and grandchildren continuing work that they themselves initiated decades earlier. The celebrations that mark the completion of major sections reveal the deep emotional investment that workers have developed in the project. These are not just construction milestones, but personal achievements that represent years of sacrifice, loss, and dedication. The completed wall sections stand as monuments not just to imperial ambition, but to the countless individual contributions that made the impossible possible. As the most intensive construction phases draw to a close, you sense the transformation taking place in how people perceive both the wall and the achievement it represents. What began as an imperial decree imposed from above has become a shared accomplishment that belongs to everyone who contributed to its creation. The wall has grown beyond its original purpose, to become something that captures the imagination and pride of an entire civilization. The stories that begin to emerge from the construction experience reflect this transformation. Workers speak not just of hardship and loss, but of moments of triumph, of problems solved through ingenuity, of friendships that transcended social barriers, and of pride in contributing to something truly great. These stories begin to take on lives of their own, spreading beyond the construction sites to reach communities across the empire. As centuries drift past like morning mist, you watch the wall transform from an active construction site into a completed monument that stands as testimony to human capability and determination. The work camps gradually empty as projects are completed, and workers return to their home provinces or settle permanently in communities that have grown around the wall's garrison stations. The silence that settles over former construction sites carries its own powerful message. Where once thousands of workers laboured daily to move stone and earth, now the completed wall stands ready to serve its defensive purpose for centuries to come. The transformation from active construction to completed monument marks not just the end of a building project, but the birth of a legend. You feel yourself drawn toward the villages and communities where the stories of this incredible achievement are beginning to take root in popular imagination. The workers may have completed their physical labour, but the wall's cultural and spiritual construction is just beginning. And you feel yourself drawn toward villages where stories about this wall are beginning. Your spirit drifts like moonlight through villages where ancient stories are being born, floating past doorways where grandmothers lean close to their grandchildren beside glowing hearths, their voices soft as silk as they weave tales about the great stone dragon that stretches across the northern mountains. The air shimmers with the magic that transforms historical fact into timeless legend, where every stone of the wall begins to carry not just the weight of defense, but the dreams and fears of an entire civilization. In these quiet moments between day and night, you witness the Great Wall's transformation from mere fortification into something far more powerful, a repository of the human soul's deepest longings and anxieties. The wall that exists in these stories is no longer just stone and mortar, but a living thing that breathes with the hopes of those who built it, and the wonder of those who hear its tales. Have you ever heard a story so many times you wondered if it was really true? As you float through these intimate gatherings, you sense how truth and legend begin to interweave like threads in an ancient tapestry, creating something more beautiful and more meaningful than either could achieve alone. The wall becomes not just what it is, but what it represents to people who have never seen it with their own eyes. The most haunting of all the legends begins to take shape in a small village near the wall's eastern terminus, where a young woman named Meng Jiangnu sits by her window each evening, gazing toward the mountains where her husband labours in service to the Emperor's great project. You drift closer, drawn by the profound sadness that emanates from her like perfume from a flower that blooms only in moonlight. Her story, as it crystallizes in the collective imagination, becomes the wall's most powerful and enduring legend. Meng Jiangnu's husband, Fan Qiliang, was conscripted to work on the wall just days after their wedding, torn away from their new life together to contribute his strength to the Emperor's vision. Months pass without word, then seasons, then years, while Meng Jiangnu maintains her vigil by the window, her love transforming slowly into a grief so pure it seems to have its own gravitational force. You witness the moment when the legend transcends its historical origins and becomes something universal. In the stories told by firelight, Meng Jiangnu decides to make the impossible journey to the wall, carrying winter clothes to her husband, who has worked through 3 harsh seasons without proper protection. Her journey becomes a pilgrimage of love, each step taking her further from the familiar world and deeper into a landscape transformed by imperial ambition. The storyteller's voices grow softer as they describe her arrival at the wall, how she searched among thousands of workers for the face she knew better than her own reflection. Can you imagine the moment when hope collides with devastating reality? The wall supervisors tell her what they have told countless other wives and mothers. Her husband died months ago, his body buried somewhere within the wall's foundation, his exact location unknown and unknowable. In the legend that grows from this moment of absolute despair, Meng Jiangnu's grief becomes a force of nature itself. Her tears, the storytellers whisper, fell like rain upon the stones, where her husband's bones lay hidden. Her weeping continued for 3 days and 3 nights, her sorrow so profound that it seemed to resonate with the very foundations of the earth. And then, in the moment that transforms personal tragedy into cosmic legend, a section of the wall begins to crack. The stones that had stood firm against wind and weather, against the pressure of earth and the passage of time, cannot withstand the weight of perfect grief. The wall crumbles for 800 li, revealing the bones of the dead buried within its foundation, including those of Fan Qiliang finally returned to his wife's arms. The legend of Meng Jiangnu spreads like ripples from a stone dropped in still water, reaching every corner of the empire and beyond. You float above tea houses and marketplaces where merchants pause in their negotiations to tell the story, their voices carrying the cadences that mark a tale worth preserving. The story evolves with each telling, acquiring new details, deeper emotional resonances and broader symbolic meanings. In some versions, Meng Jiangnu's tears create the rivers that flow near the wall. In others, her grief summons winter storms that reveal the wall's human cost. In the most elaborate tellings, she confronts the emperor himself, challenging the ruler whose ambition demanded such sacrifice, her words carrying the moral authority of absolute loss. Spoiler alert, you actually can't see the Great Wall from space, sorry to burst that ancient bubble, but the myths that grow around the wall prove far more visible and enduring than the physical structure itself. These stories travel further than any ancient traveller, spreading through trade routes and cultural exchanges to become part of the world's shared understanding of what the wall represents. The wall begins to appear in poetry, where it serves as a metaphor for separation, loss, and the price of security. Poets who have never seen the wall with their own eyes write verses that capture its emotional essence, creating literary monuments that parallel the physical achievement. The wall becomes a symbol that transcends its geographical boundaries, representing the universal human experience of division and the longing for connection. You drift through scholarly academies where learned men debate the wall's significance in classical Chinese, philosophy. To Confucian thinkers, the wall represents the tension between individual virtue and state necessity, raising questions about whether great achievements can justify the suffering they require. Taoist philosophers see in the wall a meditation on the relationship between human ambition and natural harmony, questioning whether such massive intervention in the landscape serves or disrupts the cosmic order. Buddhist scholars find in the wall story lessons about attachment and suffering, seeing in Meng Jiangnu's grief an illustration of how clinging to impermanent things leads to pain. Yet they also recognize in her love a form of compassion so pure that it becomes transformative, suggesting that even the greatest architectural achievements pale beside the power of genuine human emotion. The wall's symbolic meaning deepens, as different dynasties rise and fall around its permanent presence. You observe how the wall comes to represent not just military defense but cultural continuity, a stone thread connecting the present to the imperial past, a physical reminder of what Chinese civilization has achieved when unified in purpose. During periods of political fragmentation, the wall becomes a symbol of lost unity, its continuous line serving as a rebuke to the divisions that weaken the empire. Poets write longingly of the wall as representing the golden age of strong central government, when the empire possessed the resources and will to undertake projects of continental scope. In times of external threat, the wall transforms into a symbol of resistance and cultural survival. The stones that once seemed to represent isolation begin to embody protection, the barrier that preserves Chinese civilization from forces that would destroy or absorb it. The wall's defensive purpose merges with its cultural significance, creating a monument that protects not just territory, but identity itself. You float above artistic workshops, where craftsmen create representations of the wall in jade, bronze, and silk. These artistic interpretations often emphasize the wall's symbolic rather than literal qualities, its infinite length, its integration with mountain landscapes, and its role as the boundary between civilization and wilderness. The wall that appears in art becomes more perfect than the physical structure, freed from the compromises and imperfections that reality demands. The influence on literature grows more sophisticated as centuries pass. You witness the creation of epic poems, where the wall serves as the setting for adventures that explore fundamental questions about loyalty, sacrifice, and the relationship between individual desires and collective needs. Heroes in these stories must choose between personal happiness and duty to the empire, often finding that the wall itself becomes a character in their moral struggles. Have you ever noticed how the most powerful symbols mean different things to different people at different times? The wall's meaning shifts like shadows throughout Chinese history, sometimes representing strength and sometimes isolation, sometimes unity and sometimes division, always reflecting the contemporary concerns of those who invoke its image. During the Tang dynasty, when China enjoys unprecedented prosperity and international influence, the wall becomes a symbol of confident strength, evidence of what Chinese civilization can achieve when properly organized and motivated. Poets of this era write about the wall with pride, celebrating it as proof of their ancestors' vision and capability. But during periods of decline and foreign invasion, the same wall becomes a symbol of failed isolation, its inability to prevent defeat serving as a reminder that walls cannot substitute for political and military strength. Critics argue that the resources devoted to wall construction could have been better spent on administration, education, or military reform. The wall's role in Chinese identity becomes most complex during periods of foreign rule. When the Mongols conquer China, establishing the Yuan dynasty, the wall represents the limitations of Chinese defensive strategy, a massive investment that failed to achieve its primary purpose. Yet even under foreign rule, the wall retains its power as a symbol of Chinese cultural achievement, a reminder that the conquered civilization possessed capabilities that their conquerors could not match. You observe how different social classes develop different relationships with the wall's symbolic meaning. For scholars and officials, the wall represents the achievements and failures of government policy, a case study in imperial decision-making that offers lessons for contemporary challenges. For farmers and artisans, the wall becomes more personal, a monument to the sacrifice of common people in service of imperial ambition, a reminder that great achievements always demand human costs. The wall's presence in folk tales reveals its deepest cultural significance. In these stories, the wall often serves as a magical boundary between the ordinary world and realms of spirits and supernatural beings. Heroes must cross the wall to complete quests, lovers are separated by its presence, and wise men retreat to its remote sections to achieve enlightenment through meditation. These folk tales frequently feature the wall as a living entity, with its own personality and motivations. In some stories, the wall protects worthy travelers and punishes the evil-hearted. In others, it serves as a test of character, revealing true virtue through the challenges it presents. The wall becomes not just a setting for adventure, but an active participant in the moral universe of Chinese folklore. The misconceptions that develop around the wall prove as persistent as its legends. You witness the birth of stories that claim the wall was built by a single emperor, in a single generation, erasing the centuries of construction and multiple dynasties that contributed to its completion. Other tales credit the wall with supernatural properties, the ability to extend itself when threatened, to repair damage through mysterious forces, and to communicate across its length through spiritual means. The belief that the wall is visible from the moon becomes one of the most enduring misconceptions, persisting long after its factual impossibility has been demonstrated. This particular myth reveals the wall's psychological impact. People want to believe that human achievement can reach cosmic significance, that the works of civilization can be impressive enough to mark the Earth from celestial distances. The wall's representation in classical Chinese painting develops its own artistic conventions. Painters typically show the wall snaking through mountainous landscapes like a great dragon, emphasizing its harmony with natural features rather than its domination over them. These artistic interpretations often include tiny human figures that emphasize the wall's massive scale while celebrating the human achievement it represents. You drift through imperial palaces, where the wall appears in decorative arts that celebrate dynastic achievement. Tapestries and murals show idealized versions of the wall, where every stone is perfectly placed, every watchtower perfectly positioned, and every mountain perfectly dramatic. These artistic representations serve political purposes, demonstrating the current dynasty's connection to the great achievements of the past. The wall's influence on music reveals another dimension of its cultural impact. Composers create pieces that attempt to capture the wall's emotional essence, its loneliness, its majesty, and its connection to landscape and history. Musical interpretations often focus on the human stories associated with the wall, particularly the legend of Mengjiangnu, whose grief becomes a recurring theme in classical Chinese musical traditions. As dynasties rise and fall around the wall's unchanging presence, you observe how each era projects its own concerns and values onto the ancient stones. During periods emphasizing Confucian values, the wall represents the importance of order, hierarchy, and collective sacrifice for social good. When Taoist philosophy gains influence, the same wall becomes a meditation on the relationship between human ambition and natural harmony. The wall's role as a pilgrimage destination begins during the medieval period, as people travel great distances to see the monument for themselves and to honor the memory of those who built it. These pilgrimages often follow routes that connect the wall to other significant cultural and religious sites, creating networks of meaning that extend far beyond the wall's immediate vicinity. You observe pilgrims leaving offerings at watchtowers and garrison stations, transforming military installations into informal shrines where people pray for protection, success, and remembrance of the dead. The wall begins to accumulate spiritual significance that complements its historical and cultural importance. The development of wall-related festivals reveals how completely the structure has been absorbed into the rhythm of Chinese cultural life. Communities near the wall celebrate annual festivals that commemorate its construction, honor its builders, and renew their connection to the cultural heritage it represents. These celebrations often include dramatic performances that reenact legendary events, particularly the story of Mengjiangnu. During these festivals, the wall becomes a stage for exploring contemporary concerns through historical metaphor. Performances might emphasize themes of sacrifice and duty during times when the empire faces external threats, or focus on the costs of imperial ambition during periods of internal reflection and reform. The wall's meaning continues to evolve as China's relationship with the outside world changes. During periods of isolation, the wall represents the wisdom of self-sufficiency and cultural preservation. When China engages more actively with foreign cultures, the same wall can symbolize either the barriers that prevent beneficial exchange or the strong foundation that allows confident engagement with other civilizations. Can you feel how symbols grow richer and more complex as they accumulate layers of meaning across centuries of human experience? The Great Wall becomes a palimpsest where each generation writes its own interpretations over previous ones, creating a cultural document of extraordinary depth and complexity. As your consciousness drifts through the final dynasties of imperial China, you witness the wall's transformation into something approaching its modern symbolic status, a representation of Chinese civilization itself, embodying both its greatest achievements and its most persistent challenges. The wall becomes shorthand for everything that makes Chinese culture distinctive: its continuity across millennia, its ability to mobilize vast resources for long-term goals, its complex relationship with the natural world, and its eternal tension between unity and division. The stories that surround the wall by this time have achieved the status of national mythology. They are told not just for entertainment, but also as moral instruction, cultural preservation, and identity formation. Children learn these stories as part of becoming Chinese, absorbing lessons about sacrifice, loyalty, perseverance, and the relationship between individual desires and collective needs. The wall's legends have become so deeply embedded in Chinese consciousness that they influence how people understand not just history, but also contemporary events. Political leaders invoke the wall's symbolism to justify policies, explain setbacks, and inspire collective action. The wall becomes a rhetorical device as powerful as a physical barrier. As the imperial period draws toward its close, You sense the wall's symbolic meaning becoming even more complex and politically charged. The same monument that once represented imperial strength begins to symbolize imperial weakness, evidence of a defensive mentality that prevented China from developing the naval and commercial capabilities that would have allowed it to compete more effectively with Western powers. Yet even as some begin to question the wall's historical significance, its cultural and emotional power remains undiminished. The stories, legends, and symbolic meanings that have accumulated around the wall prove more durable than the political systems that created it. The wall transcends its historical context to become something universal, a symbol of human ambition, achievement, and the complex costs of both. As centuries blur together in your consciousness, you witness the wall's evolution from historical reality to cultural institution to global symbol. The legends that began in village storytelling circles spread far beyond China's borders, carrying with them not just entertainment, but insights into the human condition that resonates across cultural boundaries. The wall's story becomes humanity's story, the eternal struggle between individual desires and collective needs, between security and freedom, and between preservation and progress. The legends written in stone prove as enduring as the stones themselves, carrying forward through time the deepest truths about what it means to be human in a world that demands both individual sacrifice and collective achievement. As the traditional imperial period fades into memory, you feel yourself floating forward through centuries toward a distant future where these ancient legends will encounter new interpretations, new meanings, and new ways of understanding what the Great Wall represents for humanity's ongoing journey. The stories that began beside village hearths prepare to meet the modern world, and you feel yourself floating forward through centuries toward a distant future. Your consciousness emerges gently into the modern world, where morning sunlight illuminates the ancient stones that have waited patiently through centuries for this moment of rediscovery. The mist that rises from valleys below carries with it the whispers of a new age, where the Great Wall transforms once again, this time from forgotten monument to global wonder, from crumbling reminder of imperial ambition to symbol of humanity's shared heritage. You drift above landscapes where the wall emerges from decades of neglect like a sleeping dragon awakening to find the world utterly transformed around it. Sections that stood in isolation for generations now hear the distant hum of approaching highways, the mechanical rhythm of restoration equipment, and something entirely new in the wall's long history, the excited voices of people who have travelled thousands of miles, simply to stand in its presence. The early 20th century finds much of the wall in states of romantic decay that would make poets weep and archaeologists despair. You float above sections where centuries of weather have reduced watchtowers to mysterious mounds, where local farmers have borrowed stones for their own construction projects, and where the Great Barrier has become so integrated with the natural landscape that determining where the wall ends and the hillside begins requires expert eyes. What do you think it feels like to walk where ancient emperors once dreamed? The first modern explorers and scholars who undertook systematic studies of the wall in the 1900s often described a sense of temporal vertigo, as if the boundary between past and present became permeable in the presence of something so ancient yet so immediately present. Their journals speak of touching stones, placed by hands that worked when their own civilization was in its infancy. You observe the gradual awakening of international interest in the wall during the early decades of the century, as improved transportation makes previously inaccessible sections available to adventurous travellers and dedicated researchers. These early visitors often describe their journeys in terms that blend archaeological exploration with spiritual pilgrimage, recognizing that they are encountering something that transcends mere historical curiosity. The photographic documentation that begins in earnest during this period captures the wall in its state of dignified decay, revealing structures that have achieved a kind of harmony with their natural surroundings that no architect could have planned. These images, when they reach international audiences, help establish the wall's reputation as one of the world's most remarkable surviving monuments from antiquity. World War II and the subsequent Chinese Civil War interrupt systematic study and preservation efforts, but they also contribute to the wall's modern mythology in unexpected ways. You witness how the wall becomes a symbol of Chinese resilience during the Japanese occupation, its ancient stones serving as a reminder of cultural continuity that external forces cannot break. Resistance fighters use the wall's remote sections as meeting places and supply routes, adding another layer to its long history of military significance. The establishment of the People's Republic of China in 1949 marks the beginning of the wall's transformation into a national symbol for the modern era. You observe how the new government initially struggles with the wall's imperial associations. How do you celebrate a monument built by the very imperial system the revolution sought to overthrow? The solution, gradually developed over the following decades, repositions the wall as a celebration of the Chinese people's capability and endurance, rather than imperial power. The 1950s and 1960s bring the first systematic restoration efforts undertaken by the modern Chinese state. You float above work sites where teams of archaeologists, engineers, and craftsmen begin the delicate work of stabilizing structures that have survived centuries through benign neglect. The challenge proves immense. How do you restore something so vast without destroying the authentic patina of age that gives it much of its power? The restoration philosophy that emerges from these early efforts establishes principles that continue to guide wall preservation today. Rather than attempting to return the wall to some imagined original state, the restorers focus on preventing further deterioration while preserving the evidence of the wall's long history. New construction is clearly distinguishable from original work, allowing visitors to understand what they are seeing, while ensuring the wall's structural integrity for future generations. The opening of China to international tourism in the 1970s transforms the wall's role in ways that no previous era could have imagined. You witness the first organized tour groups climbing sections near Beijing, their cameras capturing images that will soon appear in magazines and documentaries around the world. The wall begins its evolution from national monument to global icon, its image becoming synonymous with China itself in the international imagination. Millions of people now take selfies, where soldiers once watched for enemies. Times really do change. The transformation of former military installations into tourist destinations creates fascinating juxtapositions between ancient purpose and contemporary use. Watchtowers designed for surveillance of approaching armies now provide scenic overlooks for photographs. Garrison stations built for soldiers preparing for battle now house gift shops, selling miniature replicas of the very fortifications they occupy. The logistics of managing mass tourism at an ancient monument present challenges that no previous civilization ever faced. You observe the gradual development of infrastructure designed to accommodate millions of annual visitors, while protecting the wall itself from the damage that such numbers inevitably inflict. Designated walking routes, protective barriers, and visitor centers represent attempts to balance accessibility with preservation. The most popular sections near Beijing undergo the most intensive development, with cable cars and paved pathways, making the wall accessible to visitors who could never manage the demanding hikes required to reach remote sections. These improvements spark ongoing debates about authenticity versus accessibility. How much modern infrastructure can be added before the experience becomes too removed from the wall's historical reality? You drift along the wall's length, observing how different sections adapt to their new role as tourist destinations in different ways. Some areas embrace full commercialization, with restaurants, hotels, and entertainment facilities that serve the millions who make the wall a mandatory stop on their China itineraries. Other sections maintain a more austere character, appealing to visitors seeking more contemplative experiences. The UNESCO World Heritage designation in 1987 marks a crucial moment in the wall's modern evolution. You witness the ceremony where the wall officially joins the list of sites considered so important to human heritage that their preservation becomes a responsibility of the entire international community. The designation brings both recognition and obligation, global attention and funding, but also scrutiny and standards that must be maintained. Have you ever wondered what it means for something ancient to become truly global? The World Heritage designation transforms the wall from a Chinese national monument into a symbol that belongs, in some sense, to all humanity. This shift brings resources and expertise for preservation, but it also creates new pressures as international expectations must be balanced with national sovereignty and local needs. The inscription process reveals the complexity of defining exactly what constitutes the Great Wall for preservation purposes. The wall is not a single structure, but a system of barriers built over many centuries, with branches, extensions, and reconstructions that create a network rather than a simple line. UNESCO's eventual decision to inscribe the wall in its entirety, including both extant remains and documented locations of vanished sections, acknowledges this complexity while ensuring comprehensive protection. The 1990s and 2000s bring unprecedented international attention to the wall, aided by improved communications technology that allows real-time sharing of visitor experiences. Television documentaries, travel websites, and social media posts create a feedback loop where increased visibility leads to more visitors, whose shared experiences generate even more interest. The wall becomes one of the first historical monuments to achieve truly viral global recognition. You observe the development of sophisticated conservation science applied to wall preservation. International collaborations bring expertise in materials science, structural engineering, and environmental monitoring that helps address preservation challenges with unprecedented precision. Laser scanning creates detailed three-dimensional records of the wall's current condition, providing baselines for monitoring future changes and guides for restoration work. The conservation efforts reveal the wall's vulnerability to both natural and human pressures. Acid rain from industrial pollution accelerates stone deterioration. Climate change brings more extreme weather events that stress ancient structures never designed for such conditions. Most challenging of all, the sheer number of visitors creates wear patterns that require constant monitoring and mitigation. Advanced monitoring systems now track everything from vibrations caused by tourist foot traffic to chemical changes in stone composition caused by air pollution. This data drives increasingly sophisticated management strategies that attempt to balance preservation with the practical reality that the wall's significance depends partly on people being able to experience it directly. The wall's role in modern Chinese identity evolves throughout the Reform era, as China's relationship with the world changes. You witness how the wall becomes a symbol of China's opening to international engagement, while simultaneously representing cultural continuity and national pride. Foreign leaders make pilgrimages to the wall as part of state visits, their presence validating its status as a symbol of Chinese civilization. The wall appears increasingly in international contexts that have nothing to do with its original military purpose. It becomes shorthand for determination and long-term thinking in business contexts, a metaphor for barriers that need to be overcome in diplomatic discussions, and a symbol of human achievement in educational materials around the world. The wall's meaning becomes truly global, even as its physical location remains specifically Chinese. You float above sections where cutting-edge preservation techniques are being tested and refined. Nanotechnology treatments help protect stone surfaces from weathering. Advanced materials science develops mortars that match the chemical composition of original construction while providing superior durability. Satellite monitoring tracks changes across the wall's entire length with precision that would have amazed the engineers who planned its original construction. The digital documentation projects that begin in the 21st century create virtual representations of the wall that serve both preservation and educational purposes. High-resolution photography, laser scanning, and virtual reality technology allow people around the world to experience sections of the wall that are too remote or fragile for physical tourism. These digital archives also preserve detailed records of the wall's current condition for future conservators. Can you imagine experiencing history through technology that makes you feel present in places you've never been? Virtual reality experiences of the wall allow people to walk along sections that existed centuries ago but have since crumbled, to see watchtowers in their original configurations, and to understand the wall's landscape context in ways that physical visits cannot provide. These technologies expand access while reducing pressure on the physical monument. The educational programs that develop around the wall demonstrate its value as a teaching tool for everything from history and archaeology to engineering and environmental science. Schools around the world use the wall as a case study in project management, cultural development, and the relationship between human ambition and natural landscapes. The wall becomes a lens through which students can examine fundamental questions about civilization, sacrifice, and achievement. The research that modern access enables continues to refine understanding of the wall's construction, purpose, and historical significance. Archaeological investigations reveal previously unknown sections, advanced dating techniques clarify construction chronologies, and interdisciplinary studies illuminate the wall's environmental and social impacts. The wall continues to teach new lessons even as it serves its new role as a tourist destination. You observe the ongoing tension between preservation and access that defines modern heritage management. Every visitor adds to the cumulative impact on ancient stones, yet the wall's significance depends partly on its ability to inspire and educate through direct experience. The solutions that emerge involve sophisticated visitor management, rotation of access to sensitive areas, and the development of interpretive facilities that enhance understanding while reducing physical impact. The economic impact of wall tourism extends far beyond the monument itself. You witness the development of entire regional economies based on wall-related tourism, with hotels, restaurants, transportation services, and craft industries that depend on the steady stream of international and domestic visitors. The wall becomes not just a preserved monument, but an economic engine that supports thousands of livelihoods. The international cooperation that wall preservation requires creates ongoing partnerships between Chinese institutions and conservation organizations worldwide. Knowledge flows in both directions as Chinese experts share their expertise in managing large-scale heritage sites, while international specialists contribute techniques developed at other World Heritage locations. The wall becomes a laboratory for global heritage management practices. The wall's presence in contemporary art and literature reflects its evolution into a global cultural icon. Artists from around the world create works inspired by the wall, often using it to explore themes of division and connection, permanence and change, and individual achievement and collective effort. The wall transcends its Chinese origins to become a symbol that resonates across cultural boundaries. You drift above sections where preservation work continues around the clock as teams of specialists work to ensure that the wall will survive for future generations. The work is painstaking and often invisible to visitors, involving everything from drainage improvements that prevent water damage to vegetation management that prevents root systems from destabilizing stone foundations. The climate change impacts that increasingly affect heritage sites worldwide present new challenges for wall preservation. Rising temperatures, changing precipitation patterns, and more frequent extreme weather events all threaten structures that were built for the climate conditions of previous centuries. Adaptation strategies must balance respect for historical authenticity with practical necessity for structural protection. The digital preservation initiatives that parallel physical conservation create comprehensive archives that will outlast any individual section of the physical wall. These archives serve current research and education needs, while preserving detailed records for future generations who may face preservation challenges we cannot yet imagine. The wall's digital existence becomes as important as its physical presence. The wall's role in contemporary China reflects the country's complex relationship with its imperial past and global future. You observe how the wall serves simultaneously as a tourist attraction that generates revenue, a symbol of national identity that inspires pride, and a reminder of historical costs that encourage reflection on the relationship between state power and individual sacrifice. International events hosted at or near the wall demonstrate its status as a global stage. Concerts, diplomatic meetings, and cultural celebrations use the wall as a backdrop that conveys messages about permanence, achievement, and cultural sophistication. The wall becomes a venue for contemporary history, even as it preserves ancient history. The scientific research that the wall enables extends beyond historical and archaeological questions to include studies of erosion patterns, materials science, and structural engineering that contribute to knowledge relevant far beyond heritage preservation. The wall becomes a natural laboratory where fundamental questions about the interaction between human construction and natural forces can be investigated over centuries-long timescales. You witness the continuing evolution of visitor experiences as new technologies create possibilities for engagement that previous generations could not have imagined. Augmented reality applications allow visitors to see reconstructed versions of ruined sections superimposed on current conditions. Audio guides provide multilingual narration that helps international visitors understand not just what they are seeing, but why it matters. The wall's influence on contemporary architecture and urban planning reflects its enduring relevance as a model for large-scale construction projects that must balance human needs with environmental constraints. Modern architects and planners study the wall's adaptation to varied terrain, its integration with natural landscapes, and its solutions to logistical challenges that remain relevant today. The preservation challenges that will face future generations become apparent as you observe the current state of conservation science and projection techniques. Rising sea levels may affect coastal sections, changing weather patterns will stress structures in new ways, and tourism pressures will likely continue increasing. The wall's preservation becomes an ongoing project that will require constant adaptation and innovation. The educational legacy that the wall creates extends far beyond formal tourism to include the countless individuals whose understanding of history, culture, and human achievement has been shaped by encountering this monument. You observe how visitors often describe their wall experiences as transformative, providing new perspective on what human beings can accomplish when they commit to long-term goals. As your consciousness drifts along the wall's length in the present era, you witness a monument that has successfully adapted to serve contemporary needs while maintaining its essential character and historical integrity. The wall that once protected an empire now serves humanity by demonstrating what previous generations achieved and inspiring current efforts to address challenges that require similar long-term thinking and collective commitment. The wall's contemporary significance transcends its historical importance to become a symbol of hope and possibility in an era when global challenges often seem insurmountable. The ancient stones remind modern visitors that previous generations faced seemingly impossible tasks and found ways to accomplish them through sustained effort, careful planning, and willingness to sacrifice immediate gratification for long-term goals. The sunset light that bathes the wall each evening illuminates stones that have witnessed the rise and fall of dynasties, the birth and evolution of legends, and now the emergence of a global community that recognizes the wall as part of humanity's shared heritage. The ancient dreams embedded in stone continue to inspire new dreams in the minds of those who encounter this remarkable achievement. As night settles over the wall and the last tourists descend from the ramparts, a profound peace descends with the darkness. The wall returns to its essential nature as a meditation on permanence in a world of constant change, a reminder that some human achievements transcend the circumstances that created them to become gifts to all future generations. The stars that shine above the wall tonight are the same ones that guided the emperors who envisioned it, the planners who designed it, the workers who built it, and the storytellers who transformed it into legend. Under this eternal canopy, the wall continues its patient watch, no longer guarding against invasion, but protecting something even more precious, the evidence of what human beings can accomplish when they dream boldly and work together toward distant goals. The gentle wind that moves through the wall's ancient stones carries with it the whispers of all who have contributed to its existence, from the first emperor who imagined an impossible barrier to the modern conservators who ensure its survival, from the workers who gave their lives in its construction to the visitors who find inspiration in its presence. All of their dreams flow together in this timeless monument that connects past and future in an unbroken chain of human aspiration. Let sleep carry you gently now along those ancient stones, into the most peaceful of dreams, where the great wall stands eternal in moonlight, its watchtowers keeping vigil over valleys where mist rises like ancient prayers, where every stone holds stories of courage and sacrifice, and where the impossible becomes possible through the endless power of human determination and hope. Rest now, and dream of walls that protect not just kingdoms, but the very best of what humanity can achieve